This is the Italian Real Estate Podcast, here to help you with the ins and outs and basics of Italian real estate, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Real Estate Podcast, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great, thank you. And today, we wanted to answer the question that should be the title of this episode: do you need a real estate agent in Italy? So, Marco, let's not waste any time. Do you need a real estate agent when buying property in Italy?
The answer is no. You don't need a real estate agent at all if you want to sell or buy a property. So neither in the case that you are the seller, nor in the case that you're the buyer. But it's very common in Italy to sell your property through a real estate agent. So it just so happens that a lot of people choose to do so, but legally speaking, it's not required to have a real estate agent by your side.
And so what, if you don't need the real estate agent, what function would they serve if you decide to work with one, or if the property has an agent that is representing it?
Well, a lot of people choose to sell the property through a real estate agent because it's normally more likely for the property to be sold when a real estate agent is involved because of the way in which the listing is advertised. So the real estate agent has more ways of advertising a property, or normally they do, to advertise a property that is being sold by somebody rather than the actual individual who is selling the property. So for a seller, it's more likely to get a buyer, I would say, if you're using a real estate agent, because of the way in which the property is advertised, which doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot sell a property if you don't have a real estate agent. The same applies to the buyer, which also means that a buyer doesn't have to deal with an agent at all if the property is being sold directly by the individual who owns it. Also, I think it's very important to consider that there are two different ways in which a seller can engage a real estate agent to sell their property. And the first one would be to give the exclusive right to sell the property to one specific agent. The second way is to not give the exclusive right to sell your property to a specific agent, which means that in that specific instance, the seller could be represented by a series of agents or by nobody, which means that the seller could even potentially sell the property directly. So if you're a buyer, just make sure that you understand if the agent that you contacted, the agent that claims that they are selling the property on behalf of somebody else, if they have an exclusive right to sell the property, in which case you might have to deal with them necessarily because the owner of the property gave them the exclusive right of selling the property. But if the agent doesn't have an exclusive agreement with the seller, then it means that you could potentially also go straight to the seller to buy the property. Of course, if you contact the agent in that case, then the agent can claim that they need to be paid regardless because you got in contact with them. But if you're able to understand that and go straight to the seller, then you can avoid, any commission fees that could be payable.
And so I'm just curious though about, because I know your company, ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com, you also help people to be able to get a property. Do you find that you have to work with real estate agents, or is that something that is not always the case when you're helping your clients?
It's not always the case. In some cases, there is this exclusivity agreement with the agent, so between the seller and the agent, where we necessarily have to work with the agent. But in some other cases, it happened many times that we went straight to the seller because the seller was not represented by anybody, or they didn't have an exclusive agreement with the real estate agent. So I'd say I've seen both situations. Of course, when a real estate agent must be involved because of the agreements with the seller, then they are entitled to a commission fee, which could also be negotiated, but they normally are entitled to a commission fee. The thing is, they can receive a commission fee paid both by the seller and the buyer. So that's why the buyer's one can be, in some cases, negotiated.
Interesting that both parties may have to pay the commission fee there.
And of course, just to further clarify, that's not always the rule that the buyer has to pay a commission fee to the agent. It always depends on the agreement that the agent has with the seller. If the seller is paying a very high commission, they may agree that the agent doesn't need to request anything from the buyer because, it's easier to sell something if the buyer doesn't have to pay a commission fee to the agent, or it could be that the agent willingly negotiates their own fee if the buyer asks them to do so. So there's a series of potential scenarios, and it all depends on the agreements between the seller and the agent, and how quickly the seller and the agent want to sell the property. And of course, we at Italian real estate lawyers help facilitate all that. So not only we take care of all the legalities of the process, take care of all the documentation involved, act as translators when the buyer is from abroad and doesn't speak Italian, but also we deal with the agent when one is involved, and we deal with the seller when an agent is not involved.
Interesting. And so earlier in the episode, the very first thing you mentioned is that it's not required to have a real estate agent. But does somebody miss out on anything if they don't have a real estate agent involved with this? Or really, like anything positive rather than maybe missing out on the agent's fee or the commission there, rather. But is there any positive aspect that the agent can help with, or that they do, or that makes things go faster? Or does it really just not make a difference in the end?
It really doesn't make a difference, especially if you have a lawyer involved. It doesn't make a huge difference whether an agent is involved or not. Of course, an agent could have, if you don't have a lawyer, they could have like these forms that are already prepared for the offers, the acceptance of the offer, and whatnot. So an agent might be a bonus if you're not assisted by a lawyer. But if you have a lawyer already, then the agent really, whether or not there is an agent, makes little to no difference.
So that's something as a lawyer, as a firm, as a legal company, that you guys actually have these things and you're ready to be able to move forward quickly and present these documents, or to present these agreements rather, and to be able to draft them up in a manner that's fully compliant, if that's what I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, of course. And especially when there is a foreign buyer, I think having a lawyer by your side is more important than having an agent. I've seen a lot of agents. It's a completely different profession. So a lot of agents, they don't know all of the legalities of the process when there's a foreign buyer involved. It's just not within their area of expertise. So in those situations, you might find that it's just better to have a lawyer by your side that deals, of course, with real estate and international buyers rather than an Italian agent who may or may not even speak English.
Interesting. I'm definitely curious about what some of those little specific things are about dealing with international, but I don't know if maybe that's within the scope of this episode or not, so maybe we'll save that for a future episode. But I know in Italy there are often problems that there are people out there who will say that they're a real estate agent, but maybe aren't a real estate agent, and even to work domestically, not just with international clients, that there's issues there. So I'm assuming that if a property is attached with a real estate agent, that you guys are actually able to verify that this person is licensed and actually able to work in the area that they're working in?
Yeah, of course. You need to be licensed, like you said, and that can be verified. And you need to have passed an exam in order to become a real estate agent, so somebody who can represent either a buyer or a seller.
Mm-hmm. But then working as an attorney in this space, You mentioned that you help with the translation and actually going and making sure things are legal, but I know there are other things that you do, including reports and so on for some of your clients. I think it might be worthwhile talking about some of those aspects, because you have a number of clients that never even step foot in Italy, but still feel very confident to move forward with the purchasing process. Would you maybe mind speaking a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's say that the only purpose of a real estate agent is to represent the seller, and the real estate agent basically completes their work just by completing the sale. So their only purpose is to be an intermediary between the seller and the buyer. On the other hand, an attorney, when there is a foreign buyer, can do much more and has a different value. An attorney like ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com not only can help translate all the documents and help to make sure that the client understands all the documents, such as the formal offer, the acceptance, the preliminary agreement, and the final contract of sale. We have said that many times that Italy has a very old system, and in order to complete a real estate transaction, multiple agreements, you might find that multiple agreements are necessary in your specific situation. So the value of an attorney becomes even more important when somebody doesn't understand the legalities of the process, or just not familiar with the Italian system, which happens often when a buyer lives abroad and never, set foot in Italy. So a lawyer can help the buyer understand all of these, and a lawyer can also represent the buyer who doesn't want to be present during the process. Or we've had situations before where our clients were coming to Italy just to see the properties, but then they didn't have the time to stay in Italy to complete the process, so they prefer to grant a power of attorney, which can be granted abroad, and it can be executed by a person before a U.S. notary, for example, and that gives us the ability to represent the buyer before the notary, which is the public official that must sign the final deed of sale, but also to represent the buyer in all of the phases that come before. Like, we can enter into the preliminary agreement on behalf of the buyer. If we have a power of attorney, we can sign an offer. We can do whatever the power of attorney gives us the ability to do, which is normally a very specific task directed at completing the purchase process. But the attorney can also help out when it comes to verifying whether the property has any limitations, if there are liens, for example, or if the seller is actually the owner of the property. So we can access all the documents held by the municipality that will help us ensure that the seller is the person or the only person who has the right to sell the property. For example, there could be a variety of co-owners, and only one claims to be the owner, but in reality, when you check the paperwork that are filed with the municipality, you realize that there are multiple owners and that all of them need to be in agreement when it comes to selling the property. And ultimately, a lawyer can also do additional due diligence and, for example, ensure that the property is compliant from an urban planning standpoint, and that therefore there will be no issues after the fact, after the person has become the new owner of the property.
Interesting. Well, I think this actually may be a great place to round out the episode, because it's been such an information-packed episode, talking about the benefits of using an Italian lawyer, and then also talking about the necessity or lack thereof of a real estate agent. So, of course, if anybody is needing to get in contact with you and your team for help to purchase a property in Italy, how can they get in contact with you guys?
People can contact us through our website, ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com, or give us a call. The number is on the website.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in any more information about purchasing a home, renting a home, or even where to maybe even think about buying a home in Italy, be sure that you're subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, both on YouTube as well as your favorite audio podcasting player of choice. But of course, the benefit of being subscribed to the YouTube channel is that you're also automatically subscribed to the Italian Citizenship Podcast, another project that Marco and I collaborate on, where we talk about the legalities of living in Italy, getting citizenship, visas, and so on, getting really into the nitty-gritty details there. And of course, if you're interested in more content about life abroad, living abroad as an Italian dual citizen expat, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia. But anyway, of course, stay safe and healthy out there. We have been here again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.